My grandson called me at 6 in the morning and said, "Grandpa, whatever you do, don't wear your brown cowboy hat today." I asked why, and with a voice filled with fear, he said, "Please just trust me. You'll understand soon." At 9:00 a.m., I drove to the feed store. When I arrived, I froze in place the moment I saw what was unfolding there. Little did I know that my grandson's warning had just saved my life. This story will shock you from start to finish. Drop a comment below telling me your location and whether you trust family warnings, even when they don't make sense. The phone's shrill ring cut through the pre-dawn quiet of my bedroom at exactly 6:15. At 63, I'd learned to wake with the sun, but this was different, urgent, the kind of call that makes your heart skip before you even answer. "Hello?" My voice came out rougher than expected. "Grandpa, whatever you do, don't wear your brown cowboy hat today." Jasper's voice trembled through the speaker, tight with fear I'd never heard from my 19-year-old grandson. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. "Why, what's wrong? Where are you?" "Please just trust me. You'll understand soon." The line went dead before I could ask another question. I stared at the phone in my weathered hands, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Jasper had always been level-headed, the kind of kid who thought before he spoke. If he was scared enough to call at dawn with a warning like that, something was seriously wrong. Walking to my closet, I flicked on the light and examined the hat rack. Both of my brown cowboy hats hung exactly where I'd left them the night before. The work hat beaten and stained from years of ranch labor, and the Sunday hat with its distinctive silver concho and eagle feather I'd found on a hunting trip 20 years back. They were identical except for where both gifts from my late wife Martha, who'd insisted a proper rancher needed proper hats. I couldn't fathom why Jasper would warn me away from either one, but 45 years of raising children and grandchildren had taught me when to trust without question. This was one of those times. Instead of my usual hat, I grabbed the old baseball cap hanging behind the door. It felt strange on my head as I made my way downstairs to start the coffee. The Fletcher Ranch had been in our family for 4 generations, and morning routines were sacred here. Coffee first, then a walk through the barn to check on the cattle, followed by whatever the day demanded. But today felt different. Jasper's call had left an uneasiness in my chest that even the familiar ritual couldn't shake. As I sipped my coffee and watched the Montana sunrise paint the mountains gold, I kept replaying his words, the terror in his voice, the way he'd hung up so abruptly. By 8:30, I'd finished my rounds. The cattle were fine, the barn secure, everything as it should be. I had planned to drive into Bozeman to pick up feed supplements at the supply store, a monthly trip I'd been making for 15 years. Today seemed like any other day for that errand except for the nagging worry about my grandson. I climbed into my pickup truck, a reliable Ford that had seen better decades, but still ran strong. The baseball cap felt foreign as I adjusted the rearview mirror, and I caught myself reaching for the brown hat that wasn't there. Whatever Jasper was afraid of, I hoped I'd understand soon enough. The drive into Bozeman took 30 minutes through rolling hills dotted with ranches like mine. I'd made this trip countless times, knew every curve and landmark. The Bozeman Feed and Supply sat on the edge of town, a sprawling building where ranchers gathered to talk weather, cattle prices, and local news. But as I turned into the parking lot at 9 o'clock sharp, my routine morning took a sharp turn into something else entirely. Police cars lined the street, their red and blue lights painting the gray morning in urgent colors. Yellow crime scene tape stretched across the front of the building where I'd planned to buy feed. A crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, neighbors and strangers alike craning their necks to see what had happened. I parked as close as I could and walked toward the commotion, my heart beginning to race with a dread I couldn't name. Something terrible had happened here. The crowd of onlookers parted reluctantly as I pushed through my rancher's instincts, telling me to get closer to whatever had drawn all these people. That's when I spotted Sheriff Tobias Crane near the yellow tape, his weathered face grim as he supervised the scene. Toby and I had gone to high school together 45 years ago, back when Bozeman was half the size it is now. "Toby," I called out, and he turned toward me with recognition and something else in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or concern. "Garrison, what brings you down here this morning?" His voice carried the weight of someone who'd been dealing with something serious for hours. "Monthly feed run," I said, gesturing toward the store behind the tape. "What happened?" Before he could answer, I caught sight of a familiar figure sitting on the tailgate of a patrol car, about 20 yards away. Jasper sat hunched forward, his shoulders shaking, while a female officer offered him tissues. The sight of my grandson in obvious distress sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the February morning. That's why I'm glad you're here, Toby said, following my gaze. We called your grandson about an hour ago. Last number dialed on the victim's phone was his. Victim. The word hit me like a physical blow. Young woman, probably late 20s. Body was discovered around 4 this morning by the delivery driver. Coroner estimates time of death around 1 a.m. Toby's professional demeanor couldn't quite mask the fact that he was watching my reaction carefully. I started walking toward Jasper, but Toby's hand on my arm stopped me. Garrison, there's something else. Something that might explain why your grandson called you this morning. He led me closer to where the body had been found, though it had already been removed. What I saw made my blood run cold. Lying on the ground in a clear evidence bag was a brown cowboy hat, identical to mine, down to the smallest detail. The silver concho gleamed in the morning light, and I could make out the distinctive eagle feather tucked into the band. That hat, I whispered, my voice barely audible. It's identical to mine, down to every detail. That's what your grandson said when he got here. Broke down completely when he saw it. Toby studied my face. How did he know to warn you about wearing yours today? Before I could process the implications, Jasper appeared at my elbow. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild with grief. Grandpa, he choked out, that's Genevieve Shaw. She was my girlfriend. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. Your girlfriend was wearing a hat identical to mine. Jasper nodded, wiping his nose with the back of his sleeve. Last week I saw Joyce at the ranch. She was in the barn and she had your Sunday hat in her hands. When I asked what she was doing, she said she wanted to use it as a sample to buy an identical one for Dad's birthday next month. My mind raced. Joyce Drake. My daughter-in-law for 15 years had borrowed my hat under the pretense of buying Dominic a gift. Now a young woman was dead, wearing what appeared to be an exact replica of that same hat. She had access, I said more to myself than to anyone else. Joyce had access to my hat, and now someone's dead wearing one just like it. Toby finished. Garrison, I need to ask you directly. Where were you between midnight and 2 this morning? At home asleep. Alone. The implications of his question settled over me like a heavy blanket. Toby, you can't possibly think... I don't think anything yet. But I need to understand why a murder victim was dressed to look like you, and why your grandson knew enough to warn you away from wearing that hat this morning. Jasper grabbed my arm. Grandpa, I swear I didn't know this would happen. When Genevieve called me last night, she sounded scared. She said she had something important to tell me, but then the line went dead. When the police called this morning and said they'd found her, an officer approached us holding an evidence bag containing what looked like official documents. Sheriff, she called out, you need to see what was in her pocket. Toby took the bag, examined its contents, and his expression darkened considerably. He looked up at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Suspicion. Garrison, we need to talk. The evidence bag contained what looked like official legal documents, neatly folded and sealed in plastic. Toby held it up to the morning light, and I could make out letterhead and signatures through the clear material. Property deed, he said, his voice flat. Transferring the Fletcher Ranch to Dominic Fletcher and Joyce Drake for the sum of $1. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What? Dated 3 weeks ago. Notarized and witnessed. Your signature looks authentic, Garrison. Toby's eyes never left my face. This gives your son and daughter-in-law legal ownership of a $3.2 million property. I stared at the document, my mind racing. I never signed this. That's not... Or is it... Then the memory flooded back like ice water. 3 weeks ago, Sunday dinner at the ranch. Joyce had spread papers across the kitchen table after dessert, chattering about insurance updates and tax forms. Just sign here, Dad, she'd said with that bright smile. Boring paperwork, but it protects the family. I'd signed without reading, trusting her completely. This gives them legal ownership, Toby continued. Motive for murder if someone was trying to frame you for killing the one person who might expose the forgery. The implications crashed over me. Someone had murdered Genevieve Shaw, dressed her to look like me, and planted evidence of a forged property transfer. The perfect setup to eliminate both a witness and the rightful owner in one stroke. I need to get home, I said, my voice hoarse. The drive back to the ranch felt like the longest 30 minutes of my life. Every turn in the familiar road seemed foreign, every landmark strange. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Joyce's white Lexus sat parked near the front porch like it belonged there. Through the kitchen window, I could see movement inside my house. I found her in my study going through my filing cabinet with methodical precision. Papers were scattered across my desk, and she had a manila folder in her hands when I walked in. "What are you doing in my house?" She spun around, startled, but quickly recovering her composure. "Garrison, thank goodness you're home. I was looking for documents to help you with these legal issues. Insurance papers, tax records, anything that might prove your innocence." "How did you know about legal issues? I just left the crime scene 20 minutes ago." Her smile faltered for just a moment. "Dominic called. He heard about the incident downtown. We're family, we stick together during crisis." I stepped closer, noting how she'd positioned herself between me and my own filing cabinet. "Joyce, did you manipulate me into signing that property deed?" "What deed? I don't know what you're talking about." But her eyes had gone cold, calculating. The warm daughter-in-law mask was slipping. "The one that transfers my ranch to you and Dominic for $1. The one they found on a murder victim who was dressed to look like me." For a long moment we stared at each other across the desk that had belonged to my father and his father before him. 4 generations of Fletcher family business, and she'd been going through it like she owned the place. "Maybe," she said finally, "someone did you a favor. This ranch is a burden you can't handle anymore. You're 63 years old, living alone, making poor decisions. Maybe it's time to let the younger generation take over." The casual cruelty in her voice was like a slap. This woman had sat at my table for 15 years, had called me dad, had been part of every holiday and family celebration, and now she was standing in my study, having gone through my private papers, telling me I was too old to manage my own life. The sound of an expensive car engine in the driveway cut through the tension. Through the window I watched a black Mercedes pull up behind Joyce's Lexus. A man in a $1,000 suit stepped out carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Joyce's smile returned sharp and confident. Perfect timing. The man who entered my study commanded attention immediately. Reginald Thorne moved with practiced confidence, his tailored suit announcing success before he spoke. He set his briefcase on my desk with deliberate precision. "Mr. Fletcher, I'm attorney for Mrs. Joyce Drake. There's been confusion regarding legal documents and unfortunate accusations against my client." "No confusion," I said. "She manipulated me into signing away my ranch." Thorne smiled like a shark. "That's exactly the paranoid thinking that concerns us. Mrs. Drake has filed for a competency hearing. We believe you're suffering from age-related cognitive decline affecting your judgment." He withdrew a thick folder. "Elderly man making wild accusations about family claiming conspiracies, exhibiting erratic behavior. The court will see a concerned daughter-in-law protecting family assets." Joyce moved beside him, her mask of concern replaced by cold calculation. "We're doing this for your own good, Dad. Additionally, Mrs. Drake holds power of attorney documents. Should the court find you incompetent, she assumes full control of your assets, medical decisions, and living arrangements. The implications hit like a physical blow. You planned this." "We plan to protect a vulnerable elderly man from poor decisions," Joyce said. "This ranch is worth $3.2 million. That's dangerous in the wrong hands." The front door opened. Dominic appeared, taking in the scene with confusion. My son looked older than his 42 years. "What's going on, Joyce? Why is your lawyer here?" "Your father's making serious accusations," Thorne explained. "We're discussing legal protection for everyone." Dominic looked between his wife and me, clearly torn. "Dad, maybe we should consider. You're getting older, and this ranch is a lot of work." "You two." The betrayal cut deeper than Joyce's cruelty. $5 million defamation lawsuit. Mandatory psychiatric evaluation, supervised living, Joyce said. "Easy way or hard way?" Thorne nodded. "Montana law protects family members acting in good faith to assist elderly relatives who can no longer manage affairs." I felt my own home's walls closing in. The ranch my great-grandfather homesteaded was about to be stolen through legal manipulation. My phone buzzed. "Stop fighting or lose everything you love." Before I could process it, another text from Jasper. "Meet old grain mill midnight. Cattle roundup summer." My blood ran cold. Cattle roundup summer was our emergency code from when he was 12, something he'd only use if his life was in real danger. "Gentlemen, this conversation is over." Thorne's smile never wavered. "You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, we proceed with all legal remedies to protect Mrs. Drake's interests and ensure your proper care." As they gathered papers, Joyce whispered close to my ear, "You have no idea what you're up against, old man." But looking at Jasper's text, I understood this went far beyond property theft. My grandson was in danger, and our survival depended on secrets that could only be shared in an abandoned grain mill's darkness. The old grain mill stood like a skeleton against the star-filled Montana sky, its broken windows staring blindly across the Gallatin River. I'd driven here without headlights for the last mile following a dirt road I remembered from hunting trips decades ago. The mill had been abandoned since the 80s, a relic of better times when small operations could still compete. Jasper sat hunched on a concrete loading dock, his silhouette barely visible in the moonlight. When he heard my footsteps on the gravel, he looked up with eyes that seemed far older than his 19 years. "Grandpa," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I think I helped get her killed." I sat beside him on the cold concrete, feeling the weight of whatever truth had brought us to this desolate place. "Tell me everything. Genevieve wasn't just some college girl I met randomly." His words came out in ragged bursts. "Tuesday night, she called me around 10:30. She was excited but scared, said she'd finally found solid evidence about something big. Had it all organized in her apartment. Evidence about what? She wouldn't say over the phone. Just that it involved Joyce and other people, something about elderly property owners. She said she was going to confront someone the next morning with proof of everything." Jasper wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "When the police called me about her death, I went to her apartment. The door was unlocked, like someone had been there before me. The place looked searched, but they'd missed something." "What did you find?" "Behind her bedroom mirrors, she'd hidden files. Bank records, property transfers, death certificates. Names and dates going back years." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "Martha Whitmore was one of them. An elderly woman who owned a ranch outside Red Lodge. Property transferred to a development company. Then she died in a house fire 6 months later. The name meant nothing to me, but the pattern was chilling. How many others? 11 that I could count, maybe more. All elderly property owners across Montana, Wyoming, even into Idaho. All had their land transferred through legal documents, then died within a year. Heart attacks, accidents, house fires. My grandson pulled out a small thumb drive. I copied everything before someone came back. Genevieve had been investigating this for years, Grandpa. I think she discovered Joyce was part of some kind of operation that targets elderly landowners. And you think Joyce killed her to keep it quiet? The hat, Grandpa. That's how I knew to warn you." Jasper's voice dropped to a whisper. "In Genevieve's notes, she wrote about how they frame their victims sometimes. Make it look like the elderly person committed crimes before they die. When I saw Joyce take your hat last week and then heard about the murder, the pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Joyce hadn't borrowed my hat for Dominic's birthday. She'd stolen it to plant at a crime scene to make it look like I'd killed the one person who could expose her operation. She was going to frame me for murder, then have me declared incompetent. No, I think so. Perfect setup. Eliminate the witness and the current victim in one move." Jasper pressed the thumb drive into my hand. "But Genevieve was smarter than they thought. She documented everything. We need to get this to Sheriff Crane. Can we trust him? Genevieve's files mention payments to law enforcement officials. We don't know how deep this goes." The sound of vehicles approaching made us both freeze. Multiple engines moving slowly without headlights, just as I had. But these weren't friends coming to help. "They followed us," Jasper whispered. Footsteps crunched on gravel outside the mill, and I heard voices conferring in low tones. At least 3 people, maybe more. We were trapped in a building with no back exit, surrounded by whoever Joyce had sent to clean up her loose ends. Through a broken window, I could see flashlight beams sweeping the area. Professional, methodical. These weren't amateurs. "Grandpa—" Jasper breathed, his hand shaking as he reached into his jacket. "There's something else. Genevieve's phone. She was recording when it happened. Mr. Fletcher, we know you're in there." Joyce's voice echoed through the abandoned mill, with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. Jasper and I pressed ourselves against the concrete wall as footsteps approached the main entrance. Through gaps in the rotting wood, I could see flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. "There's nowhere to run, Garrison. Come out and we can discuss this like civilized people." The mill's main door creaked open and Joyce stepped inside, flanked by 3 men. I recognized Deputy Tristan Fox, immediately his uniform and badge lending false authority to what was clearly criminal business. The other 2 were strangers, large men in dark clothing who moved with the practiced ease of hired muscle. "You're trespassing on private property," Joyce announced, her voice carrying across the empty space. "That evidence belongs to my legal team, and you're interfering with an ongoing investigation." Deputy Fox stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his weapon. "This is official police business. You're obstructing justice by hiding evidence in a murder case. I almost laughed at the audacity. They were going to arrest us for possessing evidence of their own crimes. Garrison, I know you can hear me. Joyce continued walking deeper into the mill. I've been planning your elimination for 2 years, old man. Did you really think you could outsmart an operation this sophisticated? Her confidence was staggering. Here she was confessing to murder, and conspiracy apparently certain that no one would ever hear her words. 11 properties across Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. $50 million in development deals. Your little ranch was just the latest acquisition in a very profitable enterprise. Jasper's grip tightened on my arm as Joyce's voice grew closer. She was enjoying this, savoring her moment of triumph. Genevieve was supposed to be simple. Use naive little Jasper to gather information, forge the necessary documents, arrange a convenient accident for the stubborn grandfather. Clean, efficient, profitable. But she got ambitious, didn't she? Started playing detective, thinking she was smarter than people who'd been perfecting this system for years. She threatened to destroy careful work, decades of planning. Deputy Fox chuckled. Should have minded her own business. I had to eliminate her before she ruined everything. Joyce said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. The hat was perfect. Frame you for her murder, then use your obvious guilt and deteriorating mental state to justify the competency hearing. 2 problems solved with 1 solution. No witnesses this time, Fox added, unlike some of the other cleanups we've handled. The casual admission of multiple murders sent ice through my veins. These people had been killing elderly landowners for years, and law enforcement had been helping cover it up. You're just another greedy old fool who got in the way of progress, Joyce said. Montana's changing, Garrison. People like you clinging to the past, holding up development that could benefit entire communities. We're doing a service, really. Her footsteps were getting closer. In moments, they'd find our hiding spot behind the old grain conveyor. But Joyce's arrogance was about to become her downfall. I pulled out my phone, making sure the screen was clearly visible, and stood up from behind the machinery. Joyce, I said calmly, I've been live-streaming everything for the past 10 minutes. The mill fell silent except for the sound of the river outside. Joyce stared at my phone, her confident expression flickering with the first hint of uncertainty. You're lying, she said, but her voice had lost its commanding tone. I held the phone higher, showing her the active recording indicator and the viewer count climbing steadily. Sheriff Crane, the state police, and about 300 other people have been listening to every word you just said. Deputy Fox reached for his gun, but Joyce held up a hand to stop him. Her face had transformed completely, the mask of civilized businesswoman, replaced by something cold and desperate. Nobody's that smart, she snarled. Especially not some washed-up rancher who can't even manage his own affairs. Maybe not, I said. But my granddaughter taught me how to use Facebook Live last Christmas. Amazing what you can learn when you're not too proud to listen. Joyce's confident facade crumbled, entirely replaced by pure rage. You have no idea what you've just done. The wail of sirens cut through the night air like a cavalry charge growing louder by the second. Through the mill's broken windows I could see red and blue lights painting the darkness as multiple vehicles surrounded the building. Sheriff Crane's voice boomed through a megaphone. This is the Montana State Police. The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. Joyce's face went from rage to panic in an instant. This is impossible. You're bluffing. I held up my phone, showing her the live stream that now had over 1,000 viewers. Say hello to the internet, Joyce. The mill's main door exploded inward as Sheriff Crane led a team of state troopers through the entrance, weapons drawn and tactical lights cutting through the shadows. The sight of law enforcement flooding in was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in days. Nobody move, Crane commanded. Hands where we can see them. Deputy Fox reached for his weapon, but found himself staring down the barrels of 3 state trooper rifles. His shoulders sagged in defeat as he slowly raised his hands. Sheriff Crane. I called out, stepping into view with Jasper beside me. We have evidence you need to see. Within minutes, Joyce and Fox were handcuffed and read their rights. The 2 hired thugs tried to claim they were just security consultants, but their criminal records spoke otherwise. As they were led away, Joyce turned back to me with pure hatred in her eyes. This isn't over, old man. You have no idea how deep this goes. But she was wrong. Over the next 72 hours, the investigation exploded beyond anything I could have imagined. The thumb drive Jasper had found contained 6 years of meticulous record-keeping that would have made an accountant proud. Genevieve Shaw had documented everything. Bank transfers forged, signatures, property deeds, death certificates, and most damning of all, recorded phone conversations with Joyce planning various accidents. FBI agents arrived from Denver within hours, turning the case into a federal investigation spanning 3 states. Special Agent Sarah Martinez briefed me personally on what they'd discovered. 11 confirmed victims across Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, she said, spreading photographs across the table at the sheriff's station. Elderly property owners, all with valuable land, all dead within months of signing transfer documents. Combined value of the stolen properties exceeds $50 million. The Summit Development Shell Company network unraveled like a cheap sweater. Reginald Thorne was arrested at his Billings office. His expensive suits no match for federal conspiracy charges. Bank records showed payments to at least 4 other law enforcement officials across the region. Deputy Fox, faced with life in prison, flipped faster than a pancake on Sunday morning. His testimony revealed a corruption network that had been operating for nearly a decade with Joyce as the mastermind and various officials providing legal cover. The media attention was overwhelming. CNN, Fox News, and every major network picked up the story. Largest elder fraud serial murder case in regional history became the headline that followed me everywhere. Reporters camped outside the ranch for weeks, but I had nothing more to say than what was already on that live stream. The victim families began reaching out within days. Martha Whitmore's surviving relatives, the Henderson family from Wyoming, the Kowalski estate from Idaho, 11 families who'd lost parents and grandparents to Joyce's greed, finally getting answers about deaths they'd never quite believed were accidental. The legal machinery moved swiftly. Joyce was denied bail entirely after prosecutors argued she was an extreme flight risk with access to offshore accounts. The competency hearing threats evaporated overnight, along with every forged document she'd created. Dominic filed for divorce the day after Joyce's arrest. He moved back to the ranch that week, his marriage of 15 years, reduced to legal paperwork and bitter memories. We didn't talk much about it at first, but I could see the relief in his eyes every morning when he woke up in his childhood bedroom. "I should have known," he said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "All those years, all the signs I ignored. She fooled a lot of people," I told him. "That's what made her dangerous." 6 months later, spring arrived at Fletcher Ranch with gentle warmth that made Montana winters seem distant. Cottonwoods budded green along the creek, and cattle lowed contentedly as I sat on my porch with morning coffee. Joyce Drake received life without parole. She'd testified against her entire network to avoid the death penalty, revealing corruption reaching into state and federal agencies. Watching her in that orange jumpsuit, stripped of designer clothes and confidence, I felt unexpected pity. She'd thrown away everything for money she'd never lived to spend. 4 corrupt officials received 15 to 25-year sentences. Summit Development's assets were seized and liquidated for victim restitution. Fletcher Ranch was officially secure, all fraudulent claims permanently dismissed. Dominic threw himself into ranch work with the dedication of a man making up for lost time. Every morning before dawn, he checked cattle-mended fences, learning operations he'd ignored during his marriage. "I forgot how much I loved this place," he said one evening, watching sunset behind the Bridger Mountains. "Joyce made me feel like it was a burden. But this is the better life, isn't it?" Jasper returned to college with new purpose. The trauma had matured him in ways I wished unnecessary. He'd changed his major to criminal justice, inspired by Genevieve's mission to protect people who can't protect themselves. I started wearing my brown cowboy hat again. For months after the trial, I couldn't bring myself to put it on, but one morning, I realized fear was just another way of letting Joyce win. Now I wore it with pride, a symbol of survival rather than vulnerability. Other elderly residents sought my advice about protecting themselves. I'd helped 3 neighbors review suspicious documents, and we'd started an informal network of ranchers checking on each other regularly. Genevieve Shaw was honored with a memorial scholarship fund at the community college for criminal justice students. Her sacrifice would continue protecting others long after her death. Sunday dinners became peaceful again. 3 generations of Fletcher men sharing stories, planning improvements, enjoying family time without hidden agendas or legal threats. Dominic's divorce finalized with minimal drama, since Joyce's conviction voided any marital claims. Media attention mostly died down, though I still received interview requests. I politely declined, most preferring quiet satisfaction of a life well lived to fleeting crime victim fame. As I sat on my porch that spring evening, watching light fade behind mountains, I reflected on the past year's lessons. Patience had outlasted aggression. Wisdom had defeated manipulation. Family bonds tested by betrayal and strengthened by crisis proved more durable than any legal document. At 63, I'd discovered being underestimated was actually an advantage. People like Joyce saw my age and assumed weakness, never recognizing strength that comes from decades of facing challenges and learning from mistakes. They mistook my quiet demeanor for confusion, my trust for gullibility, my kindness for foolishness. They were wrong about all of it. Fletcher Ranch would continue for another generation, maybe more. Dominic talked about improvements and sustainable practices. Jasper spoke of returning after college to help modernize while preserving traditions. The greatest battles are won not by the loudest voice, but by the wisest heart. Age isn't about what you've lost, but what you've gained. What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below. Looking back at everything that happened, I realized God works in mysterious ways. When that phone rang at 6:15 that morning, I could never have imagined it would lead to exposing a network of killers who'd been preying on elderly folks for years. But the Lord has a way of using ordinary people to do extraordinary things, and I'm grateful He chose an old rancher like me to help bring justice. If you're watching this and thinking about your own family situation, let me give you some advice. Don't be like I was. Don't sign papers without reading them carefully, no matter who's asking. Don't assume family members always have your best interests at heart. And most importantly, don't let anyone convince you that your age makes you weak or incompetent. God gave us years of experience for a reason, and that wisdom is our greatest weapon against those who would take advantage of us. This true story taught me that patience really does outlast aggression. When Joyce and her lawyers tried to intimidate me with legal threats, I could have panicked or given up. Instead, I trusted in the Lord's timing and my grandson's love. Sometimes the best thing you can do is listen to the people who truly care about you, even when their warnings don't make sense at first. These grandpa stories might seem unbelievable, but every word is true. Evil exists in this world, often wearing a familiar face and speaking with a trusted voice. But good people still outnumber the bad ones, and the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. The key is never giving up, even when the odds seem impossible. To all the grandparents out there sharing your own grandpa stories and true story experiences, your voice matters. Your wisdom matters. Your life experience is valuable, not something to be dismissed or manipulated by others. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that prove ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to give up. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my situation? Your stories inspire others to stay strong and fight for what's right.